Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. Before we jump into our episode today, quick couple announcements for you. So we are hosting our first in-person meetup last week. Bad news is it got rained out. Good news is if you couldn't make it, you can come tonight if you are located locally in New York City. It's in Sheep's Meadow, 6 to 9 p.m. Check out the Particle link that we'll put in the show notes. We'll have all the details there. It'll be refreshments, a couple of snacks. Bring a friend if you like. Really just a great way to get to know other people in the city if you're looking to make new friends or just connect with a new in-person community. If you like this episode, you'll probably like the people who are coming because we're friends or they like this episode and they like this podcast, So check it out. We look forward to seeing you there. It'll be a good time and hopefully it doesn't rain again.
Cool. Thanks for the intro, Daisy. I guess I'll just kick it off kind of talking about what I've been feeling the past few days because I think it's kind of a relevant topic to talk about. So I've definitely noticed myself getting in the state of really fixated on needing something to give me something, right? So I'm going and making a video on social media and I am looking to that video to make me feel good. I need that video to do a certain way, or I need to get certain validation. Like I feel like I'm actually really caught up in looking for external validation through my creativity, through the stuff I'm making, and it's making me feel pretty shitty because I feel like I'm in this place now where I'm not getting what I'm looking for. So what I've been thinking about, reflecting on, obviously the issue here is not that I'm not getting what I'm looking for, but it's thinking that I need something to feel a certain way about myself. And I think it's interesting when you think about why and when in your life it starts to happen. And I guess for us, like we're going through a lot of changes. We're literally moving out of the city we've lived in for the past 5, 6, 7 years. We both left our jobs. We're both in complete uncertainty. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget what you're going through, forget that there's a lot of stuff happening, because I think we get back into the motions of doing daily life. We get back into all of it. And then without even recognizing that like life is pretty crazy right now. And that's okay, but it's also important to recognize that you should acknowledge that, because if you don't acknowledge that, and I'm seeing with myself, all of a sudden it's like all of that fear starts now permeating throughout my whole life. All of a sudden I'm having scarcity about my social media page when I haven't felt that way in months. Like it's really been this like beautiful creative outlet for me now is getting kind of like distorted by this. So I guess maybe the recognition I'm having of maybe I'm deeply overwhelmed by something else I'm not recognizing. Maybe there's something I'm not looking at. But yeah, I think just sometimes it's really easy to start looking for something outside of you to make you feel good about yourself and to make you feel happy.
Oh yeah, I think when it comes to just living a full life that feels grounded, it always comes back to feeling connected with yourself. And what I mean by that is understanding, why am I waking up each day? No matter where you're at in your life, whether you're a parent, a new parent, you work a job, you don't work a job, no matter where you are in your life, I think it can always be an interesting experience to wake up and not know what you're doing. And I think that is probably a common feeling and something. And I echo Sophie in some ways. I think when you are going through a big transition, you really start to question what is happening in my life, because we are the ones who create purpose and meaning in our life. Without us creating it, it doesn't exist. It's not inherent, I don't think. So something that I did recently was, shout out to Mel Robbins, listen to a podcast episode with her where she took you through like a scientific proven way to set goals, because I don't know about anyone listening, but I don't know if you've like gone through and listened to people set goals and it's either the SMART method or this really intense person just telling you, do this, and do this. And it's not necessarily how it works. But anyway, I went through the whole process and it's really hard to figure out goals. It's really hard to figure out, deep meaning, things that drive you. It's really hard to figure out what it is, that you can find something that's going to motivate you every single day, or it's going to make you feel like you want to achieve because this means something. How do you want to change? Anyway, all of that to be said, I think in times of question, in times of change, in times of overall not feeling good, it's so important to have something that you're working toward that is deeply meaningful to you, that's connected to you, and that is something that you can almost rely on a little bit to guide you. I think it goes hand in hand, right? We know we're in uncertainty, and it's not saying creating goals is a level of certainty that we're creating, but it's something that helps keep us on a track. So just responding to what you said, Soph, I think in these times that feel difficult, it's exactly the reason why we need to have connected with ourselves when we felt good or even when we didn't feel good, so that we have some sort of core pillar or core understanding of why we should keep going when we don't feel good.
And I think I totally agree with that. But I think what I struggle with in that application of it is like, okay, so just for instance, like I just posted a video on TikTok that I was really excited about, and I like went back and looked, and I was like, oh, it got like good amount of views, but I like was like, oh, like I wish that I looked and it had a lot more views. Like I felt myself really, and I felt upset after. I was just like, well, that sucks because I just tried so hard, and it's like very, very micro. It's like micro viewing. I'm like looking at my life from like this very micro, like magnifying glass of like this needs to be perfect. So I just wonder, and I'm curious to hear your opinion about like, how do you think, or maybe why do you think that happens? Like, why do you think we start to put so much pressure on these things that we are looking to for creative expression, or we're looking to, like you're saying, to ground us? Like this line between I'm looking to this as a vehicle of self-expression and I'm looking to this because I need this is very, very blurry. Like I think I fluctuate between this all the time. So I kind of want to like flesh this out a little more of like, what does that line look like? And like, how do you really do something without feeling like you need that?
So I think first and foremost, it's always about finding meaning in the process and not the outcome. In this podcast I listened to, there was like science behind it of like actually getting to a place where you achieve something. It's not that meaningful. It's continuously moving toward it, actually working toward it. That feels purposeful and meaningful. So let me like take it back a few steps. So basically you posted this content, this new form of content, totally new idea, kind of changing the way that you post things. Think about the effort that went into getting to this place to post this episode and focusing on those details, focusing on, wow, a month ago, I was not where I am now, and something that I kept doing got me here right now. And I think also thinking, where am I going to be in 1 year if I am focusing and finding on continuously working towards something that I love? And we don't always have to know where we're going to get, but we have to know that we enjoy doing what's getting us there. So I think just to respond more specifically to your question regarding like you are looking for value, right? You said that you posted this episode or this content piece that you were really proud of, but you saw that it didn't get many likes. I think the meaning is found more so in focusing on what your next content piece is going to be and how often you're doing that per week versus looking to have any sort of achievement or reward, I guess.
I think it'd be helpful maybe if you could ask me like, why does that bother me?
Why does it bother you that it didn't get many views?
Because I think that means that people don't value it. It's like that whole spiral. And I'm going through this, even though I don't actually want to agree with this, but just to process it. Like, I think this automatic response comes in me. I think I've been living in this state kind of like automatic responses that I used to live in all the time of like A plus B means C. A and I don't have B, then I don't have C. So it's kind of like I'm putting so much pressure on it because maybe I'm fearful. Maybe I'm not trusting myself. Maybe I'm scared that like I'm living off savings and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to be able to make money, and I don't know all these things. Like I think I'm projecting all of these insecurities that I'm having onto external things, which is weird because like I just did my first brand partnership video and our podcast is growing, but it's like this fear I think is kind of creeping back in, and I feel like I'm like projecting this fear now into every single thing I'm doing, that I'm so in such a scarce mindset that if this one video didn't do good, then that means that people don't care and now I'm screwed again. Like, so it doesn't make any sense when I explain it. So yeah.
It sounds like an exhausting place to be. So I'm wondering, what are you looking for? Are you looking to have some level of stability? What are you looking for?
I feel like like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like I worked at a job for 5 years and now I don't. And I am kind of in this period of what feels like really, really in the abyss, in the uncertainty, in the not knowing. And it's like maybe this is a reflection of what that feels like sometimes. Like, I don't even know what day is what anymore. Like today's Saturday doesn't mean anything. Like I've been so not in a structured life at all. Like we're literally moving to a new city. And like I think it's easy to say that these things don't actually matter, but clearly they do. Clearly they're scary. Clearly, even though I'm able to relax into the present moment, like maybe I'm really not giving that enough attention. And I think that's what I'm kind of recognizing now of like, I think I kind of have dismissed this whole process of being like, oh, whatever, moving. Like, oh, it's not a big deal. And it's kind of like, I think it's a little bit of a bigger deal than I might think. And I think because I haven't been giving any attention to that, it's now projecting onto things that I do care about, like my social media. And I think the reality of it is, I think I've just been ignoring this massive change. And like, when's the last time I reflected how I feel after leaving my job? Like, haven't really thought about that at all. Like, I've been really going.
So what you're saying is your life changed a lot in the last few months and you haven't given it enough attention?
I think that now enough time has passed for me to have that level of clarity or have that level of reflection to go, oh, whoa, okay, this is kind of where I'm at. And I think I've been in this really, 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 really uncomfortable place of something I was thinking about a lot today of like, I'm no longer trying to fit in anymore. Like, I'm no longer trying to do things just to fit in. I'm really trying to embrace my true self. And I just feel like it feels so uncomfortable. Like, it really does. It's just like, last episode we talked on like this metamorphosis, this thing you go through in between entering a new and old path in your life. And I just think that like, I think it's so uncomfortable. And I think that's just coming out in other areas of my life.
So I think this is actually an interesting opportunity to be able to appreciate the rawness of life and the things in life that make us feel something, but maybe aren't the most pleasant thing. Like when you are about to move and all of the maybe fear and anxiety that brings up, but persisting nonetheless and continuing to move forward nonetheless of what you're feeling. So I think processing is really important and understanding where things are coming from and letting yourself feel and be open to things, because that's what allows us to take care of ourselves, be real with ourselves, be honest. And I think the more capacity we have for ourselves, no matter how trivial it might be to someone else, really showing up for ourselves with life changes and such, that's what will allow us to have the endurance to keep going, because we can't burn ourselves at both ends. We have to give ourselves care. And I think that in hustle culture, and I think going back to like what you said of there's a lot of uncertainty, living off savings, moving to a new city, not having a job, still trying to figure out how to make money. There's a lot of levels of uncertainty there. And that itself can cause a lot of stress and cause a lot of anxiety. Like that is just a confusing situation to be in. But I want to ask you, why are you doing all of this?
Good question. And I think I've kind of been not connected to my why recently. Like I think I've kind of been disconnected from it. And it's just because I'm passionate about all of this. Like I'm passionate about this podcast. I'm passionate about living a life that means something to me and that lights me up and like that really is me. And I feel like, and inspiring other people and like connecting to other people and hosting these events and hosting this podcast. And I feel like what I was saying to you yesterday, Daisy, and I was like, honestly, like I cried about this because I was feeling really emotional, was just like, it's this really weird place of I feel like I'm no longer placing so much value on external things anymore. And all of these insecurities were coming up for me of like, oh, like mindfulness, like this healing, like who gives a shit about that? Like no one cares about that. And I was getting so caught up of like looking around New York City and like looking at all these people who are in suits and going to these jobs and going and buying Sweetgreen at lunch and like just consuming. And it like confuses me of like, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, I just felt kind of lost, I think. Like, I think I've been just feeling kind of lost. And I think what this is, I just envision myself just kind of like swimming through these waves. I'm swimming through these waves, and I feel like the waves are just me doing it. Like, I think this is it. Like, this is why people don't do this. Because it is really hard. But I'm clearly also seeing, like, as I'm talking about it now, it's just like, but I am doing it. I guess I don't recognize sometimes that, like, when you're crying in your bed because you're frustrated, like, you're doing it. Like, you're going through what you wanted to go through. Like, you're embracing it. You're trying. You're pushing through. And I think coming out of a place of complacency and coming out of a place where I lived in comfort my whole life, like, I never knew what it was like to push through something and to really see something through. And I feel like for the first time in my life, like, I'm not giving up. Like, we're moving. Like, it's not just a thing we're saying anymore. Like, this is happening. And I think when things start to happen that you've been wanting to happen for so long, I don't think you're in that immediate state of bliss. I think it takes a little bit of time to be like, oh, right. It's like, and I think what it's kind of making me feel like, I remember when I transferred colleges and I went to a new college, and like, or even going to college for the first time. It's kind of making me think about when I went to college for the first time, and just like, I remember just feeling so anxious of just like, I don't know anyone there. Like, my parents are like dropping me off, like all this stuff. And just like, it kind of feels like that again, of just like moving on, change. And it's beautiful and it's emotional, but I also think it's kind of scary because it kind of like end of an era, if that makes sense.
Well, you're shaking up your life. And you just said a lot there. But what I had asked you was, why are you doing this? And I guess I'll ask now, why are you doing this now?
What do you mean, like now? Like at this point in my life?
Yeah, what led you to feel like you needed to leave your job? Like, what is changing in your life? How has your life changed since you left your job?
Well, I feel like when I was at my job, I just had no sense of direction. Like, I was just kind of conforming, and I was just trying so hard to fit in. And I think that it got to the breaking point of just realizing, like, I hated it. I hated the clothes I wore. I hated the shit I did. I hated the people. I hated everything about it. And I think I got so comfortable with hating it. Like, I got so comfortable being like, I just have to live this life because I just have to live this life. And I think that, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think it's just like, maybe I'm starting to really understand now that like I'm in one of these little, we go through the highs and lows. And I think I'm just in this low point right now of experiencing all this, experiencing the fact that like I just gave up like 3 years of education to go to law school where I have student loans and I have all these things, and I'm taking a giant risk, what people perceive to be. But then on the other hand of it, like, this is obviously, as I'm talking about it now, I'm like, these are just the emotions coming out. Like, I'm going to get to the point where I'm getting to now where it's just kind of like, but nothing's actually happening except right now. Like, everything's okay. But I think it's kind of like, these are clearly things that were in me. And I think maybe this just shows that like, on this journey, we can't just say like, just be in the moment. Like, we have to freaking talk about the things that we're feeling, even when we don't think there's validity behind them. Even if I understand that it's not a risk to move, even I can conceptually understand that I'm going to be okay. Doesn't mean that my body doesn't know that. It reminds me what Kaio said, like, our minds and our bodies don't always know the same thing. So it's just like, have I been giving enough attention to all these emotions that have probably been harboring in my life, in my mind and my body? No. Have I been maybe overly confident? Have I been overly present? If that even makes sense. Like, have I not allowed myself to sit in it? It's a very like abstract question. I just don't know the answer, but it's just like, or maybe there is no whys. Maybe just like, this is just where I am right now.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, what is your driving factor to be able to sit within all of this discomfort and uncertainty? Because we don't just cause ourselves to, I don't want to say the word suffer, but like, I'll say this. It's so easy to live a disconnected life from what you're actually feeling. So it sounds like what you have been saying is that you've lived a life, your entire life, that was disconnected from you. And now you're wanting to live a life that is connected to you with what you do for a living, with how you live your life. And I think the reality is when you spend the bulk of your life suppressing all of that to live a certain way, there's going to be some emotional backtracking that has to happen for you to, I don't want to say clean the slate, but for you to connect with yourself and to be able to operate in a totally connected state and not ignoring things within you. And I think you're surprised with what continues to come up, and it feels like it's something that is an ever-present obligation that you have to do as part of this work. But it sounds like that might be one of your whys, is living a life that feels connected fully, because I think you did live a life that was really disconnected from you for so long. So I'd be curious to hear how that lands with you.
I think what lands with me, just maybe I'm really thinking about like now, I think this is just what it feels like to do new things that you haven't done before. Like, this is just what it feels like to do new things. I had never in my life had a brand partnership, and I did a video and I posted it, and it brought up a lot of insecurities. I think just like as we're going on this journey of doing new things, and as I'm doing all these new things, you're gonna feel uncomfortable, and that doesn't mean anything about you. I think I just have to keep recognizing, like, it doesn't mean anything about me that I'm experiencing all this. And say in 2 years from now, when I've had a podcast for 3 years and I've been partnering with brands and doing all these things and hosting events, it's going to feel the same way of after my job for 3 years. Obviously it's going to feel different, but there's always this adjustment period that we go through. And I think because we've been in this apartment for the past 2 years, or we've been in the same city for the past, for me, for almost 8 years, when you make all these changes, but you're still in the same place, your mind is kind of confused. It's kind of like, did I make any changes? Because I'm waking up in the same bedroom I did last year. So I wonder if the move would really help with that, kind of like helping the mind understand that like you're changing and you're growing, and you're not who you were 1 year ago, and you're not still at that place in your job, and you're not any of this. But when you might get up in the morning and get dressed and look in the mirror, you might look the same. You might dress the same. You might have the same family or the same friends who are surrounding you, but so much change is happening as you know it. And I think maybe like the point of this is that like sometimes it's really hard to see change unfolding for what it is. So alternatively, what we experience is discomfort, self-doubt, insecurities, fear, what I'm feeling right now, because I don't even know what it means to feel something. Like, what does it feel like to leave your job? There's no like emotional state that equates to leaving a job. Like, it's not something we feel, but instead we feel something along the emotional spectrum. So I think in these experiences with change, I think they're just gonna bring out the emotional spectrum for a certain period of time. And I think all that, does that make sense? Like what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, for sure. What came to mind for me was that you said that you have been working really hard on yourself, on connecting with yourself, on posting videos about it, on continuously doing that. And my thought is it's really hard to make continuous change in your life without seeing some kind of reward or some kind of change come from that. And going back to the episode I listened to about goal setting, is the number one thing scientifically backed is that if you're setting a goal, you need to set a goal that is pretty achievable so you can start to see or feel even like the most minor reward right away. So I think what you're saying is it's really hard to understand and disorienting to understand where you are, because you're not seeing really any major changes in your life, and it doesn't really equate to how hard you're working. So it makes you question what you're doing altogether.
Yeah, and I think also like even like for example, like I got a brand partnership, right? And it's kind of like I get this partnership and now I'm making a video, and that was all really cool and stuff, but it was just a video I made. And then I kind of went back to life. It's not, and it's gonna be a long-term partnership, hopefully. But I guess it's more so the point of kind of like you said, like it's when you're not getting continuous rewards for what you're doing, when you're doing new things, it's really hard to find that motivation to keep going, because you're kind of like is what I'm doing even paying off? And I think honestly, like I think as like we've been going through this conversation, what I'm recognizing is like I think I've kind of been living in the state of feeling like I'm doing all these things, I'm trying really hard, I'm really venturing into the unknown, I'm venturing into the uncertainty, and then it's that feeling of like, is any of this worth it? Is anything really changing? Am I really is anything actually happening? And I think that comes up like when you said like when you don't have anything looking at you and saying you made it, there you go, congratulations for experiencing this really difficult scenario you've thrown yourself in, you're here. I think this journey is one that we might have to create our own guideposts. I don't know if we're going to always be able to find them along the journey. I think yes, as you start to grow, like I'm sure in a year from now we will have physical things that we are doing, like events we are physically going to, or this is also the byproduct of doing a lot of things online, posting a video into the abyss, posting a podcast into the abyss, right? I think the more we meet people in person, the more that when we move, this I think is a large byproduct too of like creating content and doing these online things where you're just kind of like throwing it out there and hoping for the best. And all you have as a metric to understand your success is your likes and views. And it's just like, it can get really confusing as to what's really happening.
Well, it's really easy to lose sight of where you were when you started and what your intention was when you started. And our intention when we started with this was truly just to find our voice and to find community. That happened. So I think it's really important. I think I'm recognizing right now too the importance of starting to have like more ambitious goals and having more discipline with working toward them. I think we've been in a stage of trying to just figure out what this podcast is and figure out also like what are we doing? What do we want to do? And I think there's value to really unplugging from how society works and the grind and moving really fast and to really reconnect with who you are. And I think you have really been able to do that. And I think I have too, where I'm able to just quickly like snap my fingers and reconnect with myself. And I really attribute that to taking the last 4.5 months to really focus on that. And I do think that serves a place and that is really necessary to find your why, to understand your why. But I think that is not a place you want to exist in for too long. I'm speaking to myself where now I'm ready to set more, not strict goals, but more tangible goals that are more going back to the discipline and more going back to output and trying things, because I think I've garnered this ability to understand to work from a full place and not an empty place emotionally. So I think that's really the foundation that's been laid. But now I think being able to pursue tangible goals.
And I think that this is kind of maybe like part 2 of what this journey looks like in tandem to healing, right? You do all this inner work, you do all this inner dive that you do, self-reflection. And I think we're always doing that, right? But like when you then, it's like for me, like 3 months have passed and now it's time for me to like put myself out there more in the sense of like really try more things and keep trying and keep doing different things. Like I think also there's a huge bummer, like we're supposed to host the event and then it didn't happen. Like I think that probably was like, oh, great. Like that kind of like, we were really excited for that. So I think it's kind of like learning how to now apply all that we're talking about to real life. And it's not that this wasn't real life, but I think maybe it's like healing is part 1. And in tandem with that is taking actions part 2. And I think now it's kind of just time. Like I'm ready. Like I think also when I'm recognizing, like I think a lot of this frustration comes up. I think there's a lot of ideas I have that I have not put out there. Like I think there's a lot of things that I think about that I'm like, don't do that. And I think when you're not expressing yourself, when you're turning down ideas to yourself, they start to build up. And I think they start to manifest in fear, scarcity, judgment, and like kind of like just awful feeling. And I think sometimes, and this actually ended up happening when I was hanging out with Erica the other day of kind of like when I met up with her, I could tell she was like stressed and anxious, and we're talking about her job. And then after we talked about all the things she's going to do for her brand she's building, and she was lit up. I think it's like sometimes it's like we're harboring these creative ideas that we're not connected to, and it's that harboring of them without expressing and acting on them. It's what keeps us stuck in this place.
Yes. I think that's such a good point. I know exactly what you mean. I think that you can live in a place of ideology or thinking about things for so long that you almost kind of put yourself in a difficult position by not getting out there and expressing, because it's so hard to do that on your own, to write things down and to like, there's so much resistance, I should say. I think that's a next level of work, is once you tap into something, is actually taking action and putting things out there and allowing yourself to think through things. I think there's a lot of resistance to that, to brainstorming that thing that you want to do that's in the very back of your head. And this is really, Sophie, like kind of what you have been focusing on and what you think your direction is going toward, is helping other people do this, like you did with Erica, kind of just being that person to say, hey, let's talk about what is your creative idea in the back of your head that you want to focus on, and why aren't you doing it right now? And just being a soundboard for people, because sometimes that's all you need to get the juices flowing, to get the momentum building, so that there isn't that block, because that block, I think, can really stop us from achieving what we're really possible of achieving. I think like anything else, it's a muscle. So I think kind of being the facilitator of helping someone start to move through this idea, even like talking through or even listening to a podcast like this, I think it can be a great starting point to recognize, one, you're not alone. Two, just because you feel this way doesn't mean the idea you have isn't amazing. I think the biggest reason why people don't pursue their ideas that they have is because of this feeling, because it feels like you're trying to connect two languages that they can't connect, because it's a different part of the brain that I don't think that we're really taught to use throughout our life. It's really trusting yourself, but also the discomfort of like trying something new that you might not be good at. I think there's a lot of things there.
This is really, really, really a good point. And I think this is kind of exactly what I'm experiencing now. It's like in part one or level one, and this is an ongoing process, right? So it's not really part one, but in one area, you're learning how to not resist. You're learning how to interact with people and be with your heart open and have open relationships and not judge yourself. And then kind of this other level of it, you're learning how to, like you said, brainstorm an idea without wanting to literally punch yourself in the face because you feel like an idiot. Like, I feel like they're kind of different. Like, I feel like for me, it's like going from being in a world where I was never, ever creative. I was kind of robotic. I was a lawyer. I was doing all these things just to do it for my boss and not really because I was deeply connected to. And now entering a place where I am generating creative ideas and I'm tapping into something and learning what it means to have an idea, then going through with that idea, it brings up so much resistance and it brings up so much pain and discomfort, because I don't think we are taught how to self-generate ideas. Like, I don't think it's learned or taught to us in society of like, here's how you connect with yourself. Here's how you come up with an idea. Here's how you tap into that deep creativity, that deep inspiration that you have. And now here's how you go and put it out there without feeling so like shit when it doesn't do well on social media. I think this is creativity. Like, this is the heart of creativity. I feel like we've just entered a new level of like, this is what it means to self-express in an art form, in a creative form, whether that's podcasting. I think this is what I've been struggling with of like, I go to write and I'm like, oh, like I feel mad at myself.
So that exactly right there, I think purpose is found in, despite feeling what you're feeling, keeping going, continuing to write. I think at the core of, motivational speakers and what they talk about, I do think that's kind of at the core of it. If you think, I listened to a podcast, I think his name's David Goggins, the Navy SEAL. I'm not sure if that's his first name, but the quote unquote toughest guy alive. He was really talking about all that really matters in my life, the reason I'm so happy is because every single day I face myself. And I think what you just said of like that anger feeling that comes over you when you want to write, but you have that feeling, there's two options. You can continue to exist in that feeling and not write, or you can write and feel it more intensely and process and understand why you're feeling that. All of this is probably on a subconscious level, but the beauty is that despite the discomfort, you are continuing to move on. And that is why I think right now I've recognized the importance of setting achievable goals, because it's giving you something to step toward when you're feeling like that. And I think truly, if you're struggling with at all about this, I want to really tag Mel Robbins' podcast, because it was so helpful. It was exactly what I needed to hear, because setting goals is really freaking hard. But anyways, going back to what you said, Soph, I think just really finding purpose and learning to move through discomfort or face yourself, whatever it looks like, you really can see it in every second of every day. Because one of the goals I wanted to set was learning to be more open at all times. And what that meant to me is learning to not shrink from shame when I do something wrong or when I don't feel like I'm doing something perfect, because that's what stops me from trying and learning and becoming competent in something, is that shame that I think a lot of people feel when they're looking around the room, seeing if they said it right, when no one actually cares if you said it right. And there's way more humility in saying, hey, I said it wrong, but I don't care, because I'm not here to be right. I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. And I'm here to really feel everything. And I think facing yourself is just that. It's not caring so much as to be right. It's willing to say, hey, I was actually wrong, but you're willing to try. You're willing to put yourself out there despite how it may feel in the moment, because it's about the long game. It's not about the short game. Going back to how you said you felt really upset that your TikTok that you felt really great about, the direction you're moving toward, you started to put all of the importance on, did it get enough views? But that's not thinking about the long game. That's thinking about the short game and looking for validation in the wrong place, because validation's always got to come, or purpose is always got to come from you. It's in your hands. So I think just kind of tying the conversation up a little bit there, it's so important for you to set your own goals that you are interested in working toward and being emotionally connected to them.
It's interesting, when you first started saying goals, I kind of was thrown off in the beginning, because I think I was kind of like, goals, like they can be so rigid. And I think now I understand what you're saying. And it's like set a goal so that you can understand what you're striving for. It's easy to like, I'm going to go post a video and I'm not going to see, oh, this is 1 out of 100 videos I'm going to do. It's not just this one video. Like, I think when we have to like, maybe we write a list of, I'm going to post 5 videos the next 2 weeks, right? So there's like, when you're building a house, you're not going to be maybe you will be so focused on every brick that you put down, but what you're going to look at the end is the house. And I think like when we're so hyper fixated on each step that we're taking, we're not allowing it to recognize that we're just going on this journey and it's all going to pan out beautifully as we go. Maybe wait 2 weeks to reflect. Like, we don't have to be constantly analyzing what everything means. And I think I've been in a hyper fixated state, hyper analytical state, and I used to live in these for months. And this is why I didn't put myself out there. And this is why I was so scared to creatively express, because I thought that it meant something about me if something happened or didn't happen. So I think it's just like the recognition that when I went to law school, I didn't graduate for 3 years, right? Like, it takes time. It takes time to get to that place you want to be, in the literal sense of, like, if you want to build a brand, if you want to start a podcast, you got to get a microphone first, right? And when you pick up the microphone, you're not going to have your audience right away. Like, it takes time. And I just think that, like, to anyone listening who's trying to pursue something creatively, or who's just trying to do something new or anything, it's just like, give yourself compassion, give yourself an understanding of some love to understand that you're trying, man. Like, you're trying. And that is amazing. And trying is one step ahead of where you were before when you weren't. So it doesn't matter what's happening. It doesn't matter who's validating it or who's not validating it. What matters is that by making that action, by posting that video or by sending that email, you are one step further. You are moving further. And that's what matters.
And to bridge the gap between doing the work and seeing the outcome, I think goals are what make that possible. So if you're listening to this, I really recommend, we're going to link in the show notes, you go and listen to the full episode with Mel Robbins, because there was times where I was 30 minutes in, I was like, no, I can't do this. I'm so frustrated. I can't figure out what I want to do. I was kind of working through different things. But I listened to the full episode and it really helped me get to a place where I felt like I have direction in my life. Because it's so easy to feel like you're doing so much work in your life and you're like, what am I doing this for? So it's really important, I think, just to have those guide points.
100%. I don't even remember what we started talking about in this episode, but like that was really helpful, because it's like one point, like just one other point is that like a lot of times it's not even what you think. Like I don't even know what we started off talking about.
Well, I think this was the definition of an episode that we truly worked through something in real time with the listeners listening. I think we needed this more than we realized. Like I had a whole list of things I wanted to talk about, and we never come into a podcast with really anything. We just see what comes up, and that's what I think makes it feel really helpful.
And I think maybe we were trying too hard to start. Like I was trying to read the book. Like it just like,
wasn't working.
Like the point of this podcast again is like it's a reality of like the complex human emotions that we experience that like on a daily minute-to-minute basis, and just like sharing that with you guys and like being open and honest that like, yes, we have this podcast that's growing, but we're figuring it out too.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of this, to realize that like we're always going to be figuring it out. And just because we might still feel like we're figuring it out, it doesn't mean that we're not growing and we're not beautifully evolving. And like recognizing that, I think like putting that hand on your heart and just taking a minute to like deep breathe and just be like, I'm doing it. Maybe take a look at a picture of you from a year ago. Where were you? Like you were not here like 2 years ago. Like I did not have a podcast, right? Like I was still at my job. Like this, if you will, like sometimes have some gratitude, like to recognize like, wow, I'm grateful that I took that risk, because I am growing. And growth doesn't always mean through metrics. Growth is not external validation. Growth means you're embracing and you're pushing through uncertainty and you're not turning back. Because you're saying no matter what is happening, I know it's worth it because I'm following my heart.
And it doesn't always feel good.
No.
I really don't think it always feels good. I think that's why the why and the how are so important, because you have to have something that is very meaningful to continue moving forward when you are feeling triggered and you're not feeling good. You have to recognize understanding why you're trying to get to a place in order to work through really extreme feelings that you might be having at any given moment.
And no, it's not going to feel good. And I think that's exactly what the benefit of this episode is, for people to see that, like, yeah, and you might go on someone's TikTok page and see a 250K video with that many likes, but you're not seeing the discomfort that they're going through to post that video or to go through all this. So I think this is a super helpful episode. I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad that we didn't give up after trying to record literally for 20 minutes and then Daisy's mom's dog like getting in the middle and like eating her. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think it's persisting regardless of the discomfort that will always come up. If you're not feeling uncomfortable, it means that you're not growing. It's just the fact of the matter. So we've been lingering for some time. So I will say, as takeaways for this episode, truly, I really recommend go listen to Mel Robbins' podcast I put in the show notes, because it really helped me feel like I'm moving in the right direction and that I'm being reflected that back to me. So go do that if you feel at all questioning or feeling lost at all. I really recommend that. And we hope to see you at the event tonight. And Sophie, any closing out words?
I'm grateful to have this vehicle of self-expression, because I feel like it's so helpful to talk through your thoughts. And for someone who doesn't have a podcast, like, call up a friend, go for a walk, like, try to connect with someone. I think in the wellness industry, it's so much about being with yourself, being with your thoughts, but having a conversation with somebody can really, really, really help you connect with yourself, get out of your head, and just be ready to take on the day. So I'm grateful. Thank you to all the listeners for helping us build this community, because we couldn't do it without you. And this podcast has been such a special part of my life and my journey. And just wanted to, thank you guys. So we'll talk to you next week on Tuesday. And yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for being here, everyone. And we'll talk to you next week.